You send the message, then you check to see if they've read it, not because you need something urgently, not because the information is time sensitive. You check because there's a gap between sending and being seen, and that gap feels like something you can't quite name. Just a low hum, just a waiting. If they read it fast, something settles. If they leave you on read for 3 hours, something doesn't. You tell yourself it's fine, you put your phone face down. You open it 2 minutes later. This is what the need to matter looks like on a Tuesday afternoon. It doesn't look dramatic, it looks like checking your phone. Most people think this is about validation, like needing attention, wanting compliments, fishing for approval. That framing tends to make people a little embarrassed, like it's a vanity problem, something to outgrow. But that's not quite what's happening here. The need to matter isn't about wanting to be liked, it's more specific than that. It's about wanting evidence that your presence creates a difference, that the room changed even slightly when you walked in, that the conversation would have gone differently if you hadn't been there, that the message being read means something about your place in someone else's day. That's a different thing, and it's not embarrassing. It's one of the oldest human needs there is. What makes it complicated is how quietly it begins to organize behavior. You work late, not because a deadline demands it, but because finishing something, completing something feels like proof. Proof that the time you spent existed, that you weren't just taking up space. You say something in a meeting and then spend the rest of the afternoon replaying whether it landed, not because you need praise, because you need to know it counted. You post something, close the app, open it again within 6 minutes, not because you're addicted to the number, because the number is the only visible answer to a question you didn't fully realize you were asking. The question isn't, do people like this? The question is, am I here? For a lot of people, this need gets managed through output. Productivity becomes a kind of proof of existence. If I produce enough, finish enough, show enough, accomplish enough, then I can't be overlooked. Then I matter by default. It works, partially, for a while. But there's a problem with mattering through output. It requires constant renewal. You can't carry last month's accomplishment into this month's stillness. The evidence expires, and so the behavior continues. Not because you're ambitious, but because stopping feels like disappearing. This is a part that doesn't get explained clearly enough. The exhaustion that comes from this loop isn't about the work itself. It's about what the work is quietly carrying. When what you do is standing in for what you need, no amount of doing is actually enough. You finish one thing, and the gap is still there, waiting. There's a version of this that lives entirely in relationships. You say something vulnerable and then you monitor the response, not just for warmth, but for evidence. Did they remember what you told them? Did they ask a follow-up? Did they bring it up later without being prompted? These small things land differently for someone running this pattern. They're not just gestures, they're data, they're confirmation. And when the data is absent, when someone forgets or moves the conversation on too quickly, or doesn't seem to register something you shared, there's a specific kind of quiet that follows. Not anger, not sadness exactly, more like the feeling of being subtracted. You don't say anything, you adjust. You share a little less next time. You pre-edit what you offer so the risk is smaller. Over time, the people closest to you might know a lot about you, but they're getting a managed version. The parts you were confident would land. This is one of the quieter costs. Not loneliness exactly, but a kind of carefully constructed distance that you built yourself with the best of intentions. Here's the thing that often gets missed. The need to matter isn't a wound that needs fixing. It's information. It's pointing at something real, that human beings aren't meant to move through life as if they're invisible. The need to leave a mark, to be registered, to count in someone else's world, that's not pathology. That's what it means to be a social animal with a sense of self. The trouble isn't the need. The trouble is when the systems built to manage it start to replace the thing itself. When output replaces presence, when monitoring replaces trust, when a carefully curated version of yourself gets offered instead of the actual one, because the actual one might not be enough. One small shift, not a solution, just a place to start, is to notice the moment just before you check, before you open the app, before you refresh the page, before you reread the last message looking for tone. Notice what's in that half second. There's usually something there, a small uncertainty, a question that hasn't been answered yet. You don't have to resolve it. Just name it once to yourself. In plain words, that pause is where most of this lives, in the space between the need and the behavior built to manage it. One note, this video is for reflection, not professional guidance. If any of this is sitting heavier than expected or touching something that feels bigger, talking to someone trained in this is always a reasonable next step. But if it's just recognition, if it's just a quiet relief of hearing something named clearly, then you already know what you were looking for when you clicked.